Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. I'm so excited for this week's episode because we have Kristy Baumann on the episode, and we're going to talk about how to avoid GI distress and nausea. Now, Kristy is a registered dietitian, and you might know her from Instagram. Kristy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here and talking all about navigating GI distress and running because I know it's a hot topic.
Yeah, it's such a hot topic, I think, especially this time of the year where there could be a lot of return to running runners. There could be a lot of runners having to shift their schedule around on maybe they typically run in the morning, but now they're running in the later afternoon or in the evening because it's a warmer time of day. Our days are getting longer, so we might want to try and tackle in those, daylight hours to be able to run. So I think this episode's going to be awesome. We're going to tackle both pre, during, post-workout GI distress, as well as some other common things that happen with runners that we want to normalize today, and also give some really good advice on how to navigate through it. But before we begin, Kristy, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and share a bit more about who you are and what you do, and of course, share anything running related as well.
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, I'm Kristy Baumann. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm located in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul area in Minnesota. I am a mom to a 3 and a 6-year-old and have my own business, a marathon.nutritionist on Instagram. So you might have seen me there. Otherwise, if not, feel free to give me a follow. But love helping runners, and that's what I do now as having my own business and helping runners in fueling their runs, but then everyday life as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you're such a strong presence on Instagram too, which I find so inspiring because your content is incredible. You're helping runners get stronger, kind of go through their training and go through their evolution as a runner, learning more about themselves and how they can show up to be their healthiest self, which I think is really incredible. And fun fact, Kristy knows Jenna. So for anyone listening who knows my training partner, Jenna, Kristy knows Jenna. And I'm like, this is such a small world. We were talking about it offline. And I'm like, I have to share this because it just brought me so much joy. Before we hit record, I'm like, Jenna knows everyone. She knows
great.
all the good people. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to get started with today's episode. I get a lot of questions as a coach from runners asking about GI distress. And they might be typically they're asking, why? Why does this happen? Why does my stomach hurt during a run, during a race? And why do I get nauseous? Or why does my stomach hurt after maybe a big workout or a big training run? So we're going to dive into this topic. And I think the first important question to ask today is, what are the most common causes of GI distress and nausea during training?
Yeah, so when we run, blood is moving away from our GI tract, from our stomach, from our digestion, moving away towards our working muscles, towards our arms and legs, because this is what blood flow is needed in order for our muscles to work. So that means when there's less blood flow available to our stomach, that makes it harder to digest the food, whether maybe you had something to eat before a run, or even if it was, a few hours before, depending on what it was, that could still be sitting in your GI tract, making it more difficult to digest, thus resulting in a wide variety of GI issues that can happen. And with that, if you think about, especially like running in the summer heat or long runs, we become more dehydrated. And so when we're more dehydrated, that means there's less blood flow available as well. And then again, less blood flow, less ability for your body to be able to digest what's in the GI tract. resulting in like nausea or other GI symptoms.
Absolutely. There's so much to that answer, and I think we're gonna
Yeah.
dive in and kinda dissect it piece by piece. Um, how can athletes identify, like, the specific, triggers for their GI issues? So let's say an athlete's going into a run, and they're noticing that their stomach is upset, and they're noticing that something isn't digesting maybe properly because they have a side stitch, or they have bloating during a run, or they have to use the restroom. What can an athlete do to kind of identify what is specifically triggering their stomach to behave that way?
This is always so tricky because it's like one of those things. Our body only shows us so many different signs or symptoms, and the root cause of it could be for so many different reasons. You know, it
Yeah.
could be because you had too much fiber to eat, or you had too much, you know, ate a high fat meal or high fat foods, too much of it before a run. Or it could be that your stomach is simply not used to digesting carbohydrate foods while you are running, because you know it's not normal to be running and eating at the same time. Like most people don't do that, obviously. And our stomach is a muscle, and it can actually be trained to be more efficient and digest more food while we are exercising. But that takes, just like we train our legs to run 13.1 miles, 26.2 miles, we have to train our gut and our stomach to be able to digest food while we are running at a higher intensity as well. So probably the best thing to do is just simply start by writing down what symptoms that you are experiencing. And, you know, along with that can be adding in looking at food and hydration, but it's definitely not a short and quick answer. That's why it's so tricky to navigate.
Absolutely. And that's why you're here. And that's also why you help runners too, and kind of help them work through it on an individual basis, because it is so unique and so different for all of us. Now, what's your recommendation for, let's say, a runner who is experiencing those GI issues um, during or after a hot summer run versus a cold like winter run? There's probably some differences there, and can you kind of dive into those?
Right. Yeah. So pretty much across the board, the first thing that I'll look at is how are you hydrating? How much fluids are you taking in? How much electrolytes, specifically sodium, are you taking in during, I mean, honestly, before the run or on a daily basis, but especially during the run as well and afterwards. Because honestly, sometimes it can be like if somebody, especially if it's nausea, yes, you could feel nauseous from not taking in enough carbs. But the first thing I would look at is your fluid and electrolyte intake, especially if it's running in the summer heat or if you're a big heavy sweater or a salty sweater. And so lots of, you know, runners might be, maybe they're good at drinking fluids at the beginning or they, you know, the first half of their run, but then the second half, they're like, oh, I couldn't find I didn't refill my water bottle, or I didn't want to, you know, bring more along with me or something like that. So that the dehydration can obviously catch up with you and um, make you more dehydrated and experience those symptoms.
Absolutely. And I've been there as an athlete for sure, where I set up my summer long runs in a way where I can pick up more or additional bottles as I need them. And I am like a really heavy drinker in the summer. And I know, like, through trial and error and testing what works, what doesn't work, how much sodium I need, how much water I need. Just how many liquids I need. And it's a game changer when you can set yourself up for success like that, because like a hydration pack, although convenient in some ways of carrying, maybe it's like 60 ounces of water, for me it's just not comfortable. So it's not something I want to do. So I'd rather set up a route where maybe it's like every 5 miles I'm coming back to my car, and either the bottles are sitting on my car or they're in my car, kind of depending on where I'm at and where I'm running. And that can be a huge game changer in making sure that you're getting enough. But what's kind of your recommendation for someone who is really struggling to take in the hydration and to take in the salt and the sodium?
Yeah, so the key piece is like starting to make a plan, or like first of all looking at the products that you're already using, the gels, the chews, the sports drinks, the food options that you're taking in. How much salt do they contain? How much sodium specifically do they contain? How many milligrams? And at minimum, basically across the board, even in the wintertime, we want to, anytime that you're running longer than, I'd say, an hour, going longer than an hour for a run, aim for 300 milligrams of sodium per hour at minimum. And then it can definitely go up from there. If somebody thinks like they're a salty sweater, and we can talk through like, how do I know if I'm a salty sweater? But if somebody thinks that they're a salty sweater, or like you're a heavy sweater, you sweat more than the average person or maybe your other running friends, then easily 500 to 800 milligrams of sodium per hour we want to try and take in. And with that, it's not just about the sodium, it's all about the balance, because I know sometimes runners love to drink element tea, and that they will make it super concentrated, where it's maybe I'm speaking to you. And this can work for people. This can definitely work for people. But if somebody's experiencing GI issues, the first thing I say is don't make it so concentrated. I was going to say mix it according to package directions, but Element does say on there you can mix a whole pack of 1,000 milligrams of sodium in 16 ounces of fluids. It can just be so concentrated that your body does not have enough, that you're sweating more, that you're losing, like even through our breath, we lose water. And so that can be too concentrated. It's all about this balance. We want this balance of sodium and electrolytes and fluids. And if that balance is off, you can become dehydrated from drinking a very concentrated drink too.
Which is fascinating because it's not something that you would think about when you're consuming something like an element packet. I'm guilty for putting it into like 12 ounces of water. Highly don't recommend. I used to do that. I do not do that anymore. But it's very strong and very potent, and as Kristy mentioned, not recommended. And what what do you feel like? How do you feel like runners can, test their go through like a sweat test? What do you recommend for them? How would they be able to do that? Can you kind of go through that process with us?
Yeah, so there are companies that make different sweat rate monitors now that can help to understand your sodium and electrolyte losses. You can do a sweat rate test where you step on the scale before a long run or a run that's about 60 minutes, and then step on the scale after that run to see how much weight you lost.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a formula to determine how much fluid loss. So you don't have to drink back all those fluids, but you know about how much I should be aiming to drink. But the thing is, even within that sweat loss, we don't know your sodium and electrolyte loss. It's based on your genetics, on how salty of a sweater you are. And so, yeah, we still don't know that. All that to say, there are products out there. H-Drop is one of the products that I've used. Maybe some people have heard of Gatorade patches. Gatorade patches, they don't give you specific numbers. They give you a wide range, which I don't really feel like is that helpful. But that can be a potential tool that could be helpful. But, when I work with athletes, we really just talk through things of like, have you experienced muscle cramps during past races or during your long runs? Do you notice residue or white residue on your skin, or your skin feels salty after runs, or especially after long runs? Or do you notice sweat stains, or that you feel like you're craving salt after a run, those might be indicators that you need more salt.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else I really feel like I notice is more fatigue after a long run. If I don't hydrate enough and I don't take enough sodium in, and just electrolytes in general, like I use the Scratch Hydration Mix, and they discontinued it, but they had this hyper hydration mix that has, I think it's about 17 milligrams of sodium in one packet. And I would distribute that over about 40 ounces of water. I could run in the summer months in Colorado on long runs and just absolutely feel unstoppable using that much sodium, that much just salt in my body as I'm out there for 3 hours. And like, that's how you want to feel. I think a lot of times the running community can kind of normalize, like, yeah, you got to suffer through this long run in the summer and just feel like crap. And it's like, no, you can actually feel really good if you're taking in enough. So for someone who is maybe going into that summer long run or going into that summer workout, really kind of making sure you kind of know where your sweat rate is, right? And then maybe what would your suggestion be for someone who wants to look into more detail around like the sodium levels or the electrolyte levels? How would they go about finding that out?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I could create a resource that better explains it, because honestly,
Yeah.
it is a range that varies so much.
Yeah.
Um,
So it's per person, very individualized.
mm-hmm. And like I
Yeah.
said, it can range from 300 milligrams of sodium per hour to, I mean, some people need over 1,000 milligrams of sodium per
Yeah.
hour, and it's dependent on, you know, your not only your sweat rate, but also obviously the weather. Running at elevation increases your need for fluids and electrolytes
Yeah.
as well as, how fast that you're running. If you're running faster, that means you're sweating more, and then you need to replace more. So there's all these different variables that can play a factor in it. All that to say is, like, just start looking at how much you're actually taking in and look per hour. Like, is the first hour the same as the third hour of your run or the second hour of your run? And start there and make sure that you're getting at least 300 milligrams of sodium plus,
Yeah.
a good amount of fluids with it, and then
Yeah.
increase it.
Absolutely. I think that's a great recommendation of like, one, you talked about testing your stomach, right? And just taking note of like what's working, what's not working, what are you doing, what are you noticing? Let's start with 300 milligrams maybe, and then just bump your way up. If you're noticing you're having GI distress or you're having nausea or you're feeling that fatigue after a run, start to bump it up. And maybe you'll find kind of that balance. And if not, like working with, Kristy or a registered dietitian is obviously going to help you like nail that in and be so personalized for you. Would you recommend, obviously with like summer long runs, summer workouts, that intensity is so much greater versus easy runs. And then you also have the layered on heat, humidity, altitude running. So there gets to be more taken in and more consumed on workout long run days in the summer. But what would you recommend for winter running? Is it about the same? Can athletes kind of maybe drink a little bit less or consume a little bit less, or should they really try and hold and maintain what they've been doing in the summer months as well?
I think the biggest thing is you can't trust your thirst to determine when and how often to drink.
Yeah.
Um, so with that being said, oftentimes we think we're running in cold weather, or 0-degree weather here in Minnesota, and like, I don't need to bring anything along on my 90-minute run. When in reality, you are going to feel better, you're going to recover faster, you're going to support your body when you have fluids and electrolytes along with you. I mean, I totally was that runner who never brought anything on long runs, and now I'm like, how did I survive? I just feel so much better, and I'm thirsty, too. So we obviously don't need as much if you're not sweating as much. Oftentimes I'll have people say like, why am I constantly having to stop to pee like on my long run? Well, that can be an
Yeah.
indicator of like, okay, are you only drinking water because you actually need the electrolytes, the sodium to help your body actually absorb the water and the fluids? So that could be an indicator of like, maybe I'm drinking too much fluids or too much water, and pushing it a little bit too much if you're, constantly having to stop to pee.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so that would be something to be aware of. But again, it kind of goes back to that sweat rate, doing a sweat rate test where you step on the scale before and after a run to see how does my sweat rate change in colder weather versus the summer weather, because it does change pretty drastically for those different seasons. And then, if it's an easy run versus a harder workout too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can confirm this. I have done this myself. Like I've done a sweat test like in the summer, which is like just ridiculous. And then I recently did one in the winter and it is drastically different. And if you see me running in the summer, I have like a handheld like glued to my hand like all summer long. And in the winter, I'm out there running without the handheld on just like those daily easy runs. Obviously, the long run, I still have it. I think it's still so important training your stomach, making sure that you're ready for race day for sure. So, absolutely, highly, highly, highly recommend doing the summer and winter sweat test and see the difference, and then lean into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. What role does stress play in GI issues during exercise?
Yeah, so stress has a big impact on our hormones. So, our stress hormone, cortisol, for example, that can slow digestion as well. So, if you think of when our body is at increased stress, this is when our body goes into the fight or flight response,
Mhm.
where digestion during that time is not important. And so, again, that one of these contributing factors, stress and cortisol, is definitely one of those contributing factors of increased risk of GI issues when you're running, because your body recognizes that as stress. And so obviously this can play a role on come race day too, because with like pre-race anxiety and the nerves and,
Yeah.
going to the bathroom multiple times before you start your race. Um, Obviously we can't get away, completely from that stress that can happen on race day morning as well.
Yeah.
But there's definitely things that, that you can do from a visualize or breathing exercise standpoint, to try and help manage that stress too.
Yeah, so if you're noticing you're going into maybe workouts, long runs, races, and your nutrition's dialed, it's like as bland. I hate that word, but like as basic as it can get, right? It's like basic carbs, there's not fiber, there's not fat. You're doing everything that you're supposed to do, but you still notice these GI issues are coming into play. um, Stress could be that factor. And like cortisol levels are higher when you're training too. Like the more you go through a training cycle, the longer you go through a training cycle, the longer your cortisol levels are higher just based on that training stress too. And one thing that I discovered during the Indianapolis build that I had last fall was Emily Saul, who is she is a sports psychology coach and she's been on the podcast a few times. She's based in Boston and she has these like marathon meditation sequences on YouTube. Have you seen these, Kristy?
No, this is awesome.
Oh yeah, it's so great. She has some for like race week and then some for like race morning. So I highly recommend if you're someone who maybe has that kind of like higher stress going into a race or kind of going into a big long run, taking a few minutes to, close your eyes, maybe listen to Emily or take in some, deep breaths in and out can really help kind of alleviate some of that stress and some of those higher cortisol levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think that's really good and really important and something good to practice with before track workouts or long runs too.
Yeah, because how we show up in training is how we show up on race
Yeah.
day. So if you know it works in training, you can bring it with you to race day. And I know, I think it was New York City this fall. They had like these meditation pods at like did you hear about this? Like
No.
at like I guess like the athletes village where you could just like go into this pod and be like totally alone, gather your thoughts, like just have a minute to yourself. And I think that that's really cool because like Emily had mentioned on an earlier podcast, you could put your hoodie up, you can put your headphones in and just try to do everything you can do to like keep that race day anxiety as low as possible because if everyone around you is hyped up and you're in that environment for so long, especially for like a major marathon, or we were talking about running CIM before we hit record, like CIM's a long morning too. Like you're just around it for so long. Doing what you can do to really work on alleviating that stress is key.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So are there like any supplements or anything that an athlete can take to alleviate GI distress? Or is it really having this balance of balancing your stress, balancing your nutrition, fiber, fat intake, and then also your sodium levels?
Yeah, I mean, there's like, ginger, I think of ginger chews for nausea.
Yeah.
And I want to say there might be some gels or chews like that have ginger in as well. But I think, it's usually that there's more of a deeper root cause. And yes, it definitely can be that pre-race anxiety or that piece of it. But, it's also it goes all that to say, if like you are struggling or navigating with nausea or GI issues, there's more that we can dig into. You shouldn't have to suffer through it. And there's so many different avenues to look at before, maybe some people have taken an anti-nausea medication or something, prescribed from their doctor, but, let's see if we can figure out the root cause and really get down to what's causing it. Because there's likely side effects of taking those things as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like at the end of the day, like if you're taking a supplement or a medication, like that's just putting a band-aid over, like you said, the root cause. What are some of those common like root causes that can really upset the stomach?
Right. Yeah. So we talked about the dehydration piece,
Mhm.
which is a big one. It could be. So sometimes I have running clients come to me and they are eating. Runners can be very health conscious and be eating very healthy. And sometimes too many healthy foods, specifically too many high fiber foods, can cause GI issues on your run the next day.
Yeah.
And so if you are, the type of runner that loves to eat like a lot of vegetables, and especially if they're raw vegetables or a ton of fruit in combination, or like always eating, or I had an athlete eating lentil pasta the night before her long run. And so choosing like the white refined grains versus lentil pasta with, I don't know, don't quote me, but like 8 grams of fiber per serving type of thing. Like though, so like fiber is a big thing. All that to say is fiber is a big thing that can cause GI issues on your run the next day. And some people are just more sensitive to it as well. Or I had another athlete. She discovered she would always go out to eat like on a Friday night to like a bar and grill and, get French fries, get burgers, get, some of her favorite foods, and later realizing like the high fat foods was contributing to her GI issues the next day on her morning long runs. So looking at that, or even maybe you are pretty good at hydrating during your run, but you had several glasses of wine or alcohol to drink the night before. And that resulted in dehydration, even though maybe you were hydrating well during your run, but you're dehydrated going into your run. let's see, spicy foods. That can be another one. So for example, an athlete, she's like, oh, I was just craving the spicy and I ordered extra spicy the night before my long run and I paid for it the next day on my run. And she's like, I didn't think about it in the moment, but the next day I realized like the extra spicy was not a good choice. And I had dealt with GI issues the next day.
Oh, yeah. It's all like, it's tough because I think a lot of times we want to lean into like, this is what I want to have. But maybe on this other side, this is what I should have. And I know like Jenna and I trained together for Indianapolis, and like we would on some Friday nights, we would make dinner and eat together, and it would be the same dinner every single time. And it was something that we really wanted to also replicate the night before Indianapolis marathon to like really just keep things as easy and as seamless as possible, because we knew like that meal worked for us. It was very basic protein, carbohydrate, very little like veggie or green on the plate, just to keep things so neutral that we could go in and crush, the long run the next day. So I think it's a balance of, yeah, maybe that Friday night you go for the more basic meal, and then on Saturday night you can really go after like the alcohol, the spicy food, your favorite like burgers and fries, high fat, whatever, high fiber meal, and really lean into it that way. And then you're setting yourself up for success. You get both. You
Yep.
get a great long run and you get the food that you want, all in the same day.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And some people have to be even more careful where it's not just the night before, but it's like the whole day or maybe even a day and a half, 2 days before, if they're really sensitive to certain foods. It could be acidic foods too. I know sometimes even tomato sauce can be, or I know another runner was eating a lot of oranges, citrus fruit, like the night before a long run. And again, just paid for it on her
Oh, wow.
the
I
next
would
day.
think that. That would be something that would stump me for sure. Like, oh, I just had a lot of citrus. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, so it really can be anything because it's all different and unique to us. And I know when I run like in the morning, I prefer morning running. A lot of times that's because my stomach feels its best. And anytime I'm running, I have like a noon cutoff time, but I coach a team in Denver, and sometimes I'll run doubles, sometimes I'll run with them. And running 3, 5 miles at night is a totally different ball game with my stomach, right? Like I have to really watch what I eat throughout the whole day to make sure I don't have too much fat and too much fiber before going into that double run or that evening run. Do you have any recommendations for the evening runner that has to one, either run all their training at night, or for the people who do run their workouts at night, do you kind of have any guidelines around how to structure their day?
Right. Yeah. So I always like to work backwards.
Mm.
So starting with the time that they plan to run in the evening, and then kind of working backwards from there, having your pre-run fuel, whether it's a half an hour before, sometimes people want a little bit more time, an hour before. I'm the type of person that eats it 10 minutes or 5 minutes before heading out the
You trained
door.
your stomach, Kristy.
But then working backwards from there. So then, having, it might be kind of a middle of the afternoon, larger snack, more balanced if it's, 3, 4 hours from the time that you're going to eat. So, something with obviously carbs and, being aware of like how much fiber am I eating during that time. Carbs, protein, having some fiber in, but that might be dependent on the person. Cooked vegetables tend to be easier on the gut than raw vegetables. And
Mm.
so there's definitely, strategies with that, or, certain vegetables are more gas producing, like raw broccoli, raw cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage. So again, it's kind of being aware of those foods, as, or you can think of beans, for example, high in fiber. And if your stomach isn't used to not only the food, but the portion size that you're eating, maybe if you eat a little bit, you might be fine, but the portion size obviously plays a factor in that as well. So yeah, I just kind of like to work backwards, and then you prefer to have like a snack, cheese and crackers 2 hours before the run, if that makes you feel a little bit better. But yeah, it's definitely like one of those things like, um, one, you can train your body to get used to running in the afternoon or evenings, but if you're
Mhm.
constantly switching it up, it can definitely be a challenge. So
Yeah. Yeah. As a coach, I definitely recommend to the athletes that I coach, like, let's just try and run at the same time every day because
yeah,
it helps everyone and everything, especially the athletes who are parents. Like, first thing in the morning is great because then you know it's taken care of, it's out of the day. And, Kristy, you're a parent, you know how busy the day can get. And then all of a sudden it's 9 o'clock at night. And if your run's not done, like, what are the chances that you're running at 9 o'clock at night? Right.
right.
And, and being able to, like, yeah, like, if you can stay within that same time frame every single day, your stomach's going to feel a little bit better. And you'll get to know, like, what works, what doesn't work too, which is nice.
Right. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. Well, let's get into, like, pre-workout nutrition. What are kind of your, recommendations or the best types of pre-workout meals and snacks to fuel before going into a workout?
Yeah, so you want to focus on low fat, low fiber carbs, and possibly adding in some protein in there, depending on, some people prefer just to have like a banana and peanut butter
Mhm.
because let's say you're getting hungry on your run. Um, that can uh, help to stabilize your blood sugar and prevent that hunger. Um, or maybe, you do white bread or sourdough bread with jelly on it. You can absolutely add hard-boiled egg on the side if you feel like, again, that feels better to you. But the focus is those simple carbohydrate foods that are more fast digesting, that are low in fiber, to give your body that quick source of energy from the glucose, so then your muscles have that energy quickly available, and then it's just not sitting in your stomach as high fiber foods or higher fat foods would. And even protein just takes longer to digest, so that sits in your stomach longer. But anything from graham crackers to dried fruit like dried mangoes, dried apricots, of course, like they do have a little bit of fiber in, so depending on the person, if it works. You can do Pop Tarts, you can do stroop waffles. I mentioned like the white bread or English muffin with jam on it, things like that. What's
Yeah.
your go-to?
Yeah, that's perfect. So before a workout, I usually have two pieces of toast and a banana with a little bit of peanut butter. And then I bring gels with me because my workouts they're pretty hardy. I'm usually running anywhere from 10 to 12 miles total in the morning. So I just want to make sure I have enough with me. The gels are amazing to kind of keep that energy flowing. And I feel with two pieces of toast, a banana, a little bit of nut butter, that's like enough to, like, feel good, ready to go, and it doesn't upset my stomach. And I do kind of have a sensitive stomach. So being able to go in onto those track workouts and being able to do what I need to do without having any sort of, like, cramping or GI distress is huge. And that's been my go-to for a really long time. The other kind of, like, secret weapon I have for my morning breakfast is Cheerios. Like, that's so basic and it sounds like maybe we're in, like, the 1980s, but Cheerios and cereal, like, so easy. It's so fast. I would say just caution, like, what kind of milk you're using. Cause I noticed, like, the almond milk I was using I was kind of having a little bit of, like, just cramping going on during running. So just kind of
Okay.
notice, like, what you're using. But cereal is, like, such a fun way to consume something, especially in the summer when it's warmer and you want something, like, cold, easy. Yeah, you can get out the door within 5 minutes. But I've had athletes before um, eat, like, eggs, bacon, and drink orange juice before workouts and long runs, and they're fine, which is wild because that is, like, heavy fat, heavy protein, Not a lot of carbs, but, they're gelling, so it's fine, and it works for them. So I think it's like, do what works for you, but also like, take note if something isn't working.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I know this is going to be different for everyone, but like, what's your general recommendation of how long to eat before a workout? Like, you can eat within 10 minutes, and I'm pretty close to that. Like, I can literally like eat, walk out the door to drive to the track is like 5 minutes, and I can start running and I'm fine. But what are some general guidelines for a runner to kind of follow with that?
Yeah. So I mean, if you're new to it, it's one of those things like, especially if you're running in the morning, it's not like you want to wake up earlier just to eat. So you might have to eat right away, like once you get up and then get ready. So, a half an hour. Liquid carbohydrates tend to be easier. So
Yeah.
thinking of sports drinks or, anything with Gatorade Scratch, or pureed foods. So like applesauce and applesauce pouch. I've had several athletes, they never really fueled before a run, but then they discovered like, okay, I can do an applesauce pouch as a starting point
Yeah.
to start those carbs. And pureed, again, it's like your mouth doesn't have to mechanically break down the carbs. It's already in the pureed form. So that can help. Um, so if it's a half an hour, I think that's can be a good starting point. But even if you're like, every time I've tried something to eat before a run, it never works. Start with just like a bite or two of banana
Mhm.
or like something small. It doesn't have to be, we can work up our way to eating a higher volume of food. But again, it's that training the stomach piece where you just have to like, start to drink some Gatorade, start to have a couple bites of a banana and see if you can tolerate that. And then, doing that for 3 to 5 days. Sometimes people want to do that for longer, a couple of weeks until they feel comfortable, and then you can increase it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started as a fasted runner and then I worked my way up to half a banana and then a full banana. And now I'm at like two pieces of toast, some nut butter, and a banana. So
Yeah.
you can evolve. And it's fun to be able to like know that you are consuming what you're consuming and you're able to run really strong too. And I feel like there's this whole movement right now with like fueling and taking in as much as we possibly can to feel our strongest. And I think that that's a really powerful place to be. But you have to start somewhere, and kind of knowing where to start and how to slowly add it in is super, super important too. I
Yeah.
like taking gels if I'm like really on the go and like don't even have time to like make or eat a bowl of cereal. Like gels are a great option too.
Yeah.
Graham crackers, so easy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I noticed one thing that made a huge difference for myself once I started eating before a run is like preventing injuries or just preventing those
Yeah.
little overuse injuries that would kind of pop up because now your body isn't in that fasted state and higher in cortisol when you're not eating, which
Mhm.
increases the risk of injury. So eat before every run.
Yeah, even if you're coming back from, let's say you're in a reverse taper from a marathon or a half marathon, and Kristy, I don't know if you posted this or if I'm thinking of someone else, but I saw this a week or two ago how like stress bone injuries can increase 6 to 8 weeks after running your A goal race because the athlete is starting to add volume back, but they're not really running the same volume that they were in training, and the nutrition suffers, and they're not fueling before their runs and they're not fueling after their runs, and then the workouts start to be added into the schedule but the nutrition staying the same, and that's a really dangerous place to be. So making sure, yeah, you're definitely getting something in before, during, and after those hard sessions, and of course before the easy runs too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What are your favorite sports drinks and gels to fuel with during exercise that like seem as easy and as seamless as possible on the GI?
Yeah. So, well, one, I will say a lot of people love Morton for people
Yeah.
who have experienced GI issues in the past. One gel that I discovered recently, it was Precision.
Yeah.
That is a very neutral gel. It's not, Morton is more of a jello consistency and it's not as thick. So I've been really enjoying incorporating precision gels. I think there are 30 grams of carbs per gel as well. I know, and I don't know if I remember Jenna would use the BPN gel. I just tried one of those for the first time on my run and I really liked it. And they're more of a whole food based gel.
Yeah, so she was using those at the start of our indie training, and then she moved over to we were taking SIS beta, and then she was taking the gel carbs, like just carbs.
Okay.
And it's like it's a huge gel and but it also contains about 50 grams of carbohydrates. So we would joke and we would just say like, "Oh, carbs." Like that's what you're taking. It's just carbs. The white packaging. So she transitioned over to that. But I mean, I think, sometimes too with training, it's like we were doing these monster long runs with monster quality. So like the gels just kind of got bigger and bigger. And we were taking like 40 to 50 grams of carbohydrates per like every 3-4 miles. And sometimes it's, going to the precision. I also take that. I really enjoy that one. They also have a caffeine version right now, which I like too,
Yes.
especially because the SIS beta fuel at the time of this recording is sold out everywhere and it has been sold out everywhere. So Precision is still in stock. So it's like a great alternative and it's a very neutral gel. It's really good on the GI for sure.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd say those are some of the top. I enjoy Huma as well. Huma Plus gels. The Plus is higher in
Yeah.
electrolytes. Um, I'll mix it up. I like variety and taste, but yeah, from a GI standpoint, those neutral gels tend to sit well for people as well as, the thing is with the hydrogels. So like Morton is a hydrogel, so it includes the liquid in it. And
Yeah.
so it's designed so you don't have to drink fluids with it at the same time. And that's
Yeah.
what helps make it easier on the stomach too.
Yeah. It's a game
Same with
changer
the
gel.
SIS.
Yeah, yeah, they're game changer gels, and like what I love about the Morton gels, they make the Morton 160. So they have the 100 calorie with I think 21 grams of carbohydrates. But then let's say you're running a marathon and you want like the bigger gel or you don't want to carry as many gels with you, which is, kind of a real problem. Um, they have the Morton 160 and that's 40 grams of carbohydrates in that gel and it goes down really easy and it's a great gel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other
What?
things,
Go ahead.
I was going to
Yeah.
say, one of the other things with gels is like, speaking of GI issues, is sometimes it's like you might want to like sip on the gel versus taking it all at once as well. So if somebody's, navigating GI issues, instead of taking a gel all at once, you might like sip on it over a mile or two and like get this steady supply of glucose of energy, which can help not upset your stomach too.
Yeah, that's huge too. And I am definitely team sipping gels and it really is a game changer because you can take your time, you're relaxed. It's not like, you're opening a gel and you're like, let's try and take this as fast as I can. That can lead to so many other things, I think, going wrong. And hey, we're racing. And if you're running a marathon, you're going to be out there for a while anyway. So you might as well like take in the sights, sip on your gel, and feel good in the process.
Yeah.
Um, what are the best foods to eat after a workout to aid in recovery and prevent any sort of stomach distress?
Yeah. So afterwards, again, if somebody's nauseous, the first thing I would have them do is drink fluids and make sure that they're getting in electrolytes and sodium as well. Just because, and again, ideal thing would be like a sports drink that has all three in it, or
Yeah.
even, chocolate milk, for example, because it has the fluids, it has the electrolytes, and it has the carbs in it, which might be the reason why you feel nauseous too. And drinking things tends to be easier, especially if you're nauseous or you don't have much of an appetite. So, whether it's a smoothie, whether it's chocolate milk or plant-based milk, as well, if you can't do dairy. Sometimes even the thickness of smoothies might not feel good. And so I know there's powders and stuff that you can just mix in water that contain protein in them, as well, which can, again, just make it easier to drink. So all that to say is, like, you want fluids, you want electrolytes, you want carbs, you want protein. You basically want it all after a workout, and especially if you can get it in within 30 minutes, at least starting to refuel. But obviously I know that can be easier said than done, especially if you're not feeling your best.
Yeah, and I think liquids are such a game changer. They're easy to take in, easy to consume. Like, I typically drive for my long runs, and I would always bring a protein shake, one for me, one for Jenna after our long runs this summer. And we would literally open them and start like taking it in within like seconds of getting back to the car. And it was like, let's do this. Let's get this in as quickly as possible. And that made such a big difference on how we felt later in the day. So if you're
Yes.
yeah, so it's like kind of fun to experiment with that kind of stuff. And you can almost make it a game. Like, how fast can I get in liquids, not just water, sodium, but maybe it's that protein. Fruit is, I think, a great option too, because it kind of has that like watery base to it. And it's easy to kind of take in and see how you feel, see how you just notice the difference. And it can be really empowering. And then it's something you want to do every week.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Before we hit record on this episode, we were talking about like just some common things that can happen to runners outside of running with their GI. And that could be like we mentioned, or you mentioned, like day to day bloating or bloating throughout the day. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit more and maybe some strategies on how to prevent that? And then if there's anything else kind of related to the runner outside of their running that relates to their GI, and kind of break that down?
Right. Yeah. So clients that I work with, it's definitely not uncommon for them to experience bloating, and oftentimes we might automatically think like, oh, I'm lactose intolerant, or I can't tolerate gluten, or I can't tolerate this food. And when in reality, maybe yes, it could be, but more likely than not, there's something else going on. So it's so funny talking about this because it's so simple. It's like, sometimes, as runners, high achievers, we are constantly on the go. And sometimes it's simply like taking the time to chew your food that can make the biggest difference in not feeling bloated after your meal.
Chew your food.
And so, it's again like paying attention to your meal hygiene, or like what you're doing during your meals is, it's not necessarily like the food that's causing GI issues or bloating on a day-to-day basis, but it's likely some other reasons. Stress definitely being a big factor. And oftentimes I'll have athletes say like, yeah, I know when I'm more stressed, I experience more bloating type of thing too. So chew your food to applesauce consistency. Take your time to eat.
Which is good for all of us to that's just a great reminder for all of us.
Right. Yeah. And there's definitely like other strategies as well. But it's sometimes those simplest things that can make quite a bit of a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And it's like hearing like things that we know we need to do. So this is like a great reminder for that. And then maybe also learning quite a bit about, oh, maybe I'm eating too much fat, or I'm eating too much fiber before a run, or I need to really work on my stress levels or work on my hydration. Like, I think there's so many great tips that you talked about today on how to help the runner who has maybe GI or nausea, distress. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to cover today?
Let's see. I think those are the biggest things. It's again one of those things like just talking about those everyday meals. Same goes with gels. Is like sometimes we automatically blame the gel for the GI issues, which yes, definitely concentrated sugar going into our stomach might be contributing to it, but there's like so many other factors to look at, and hopefully it's like not automatically be like I can't I can't take gels. I'm not going to fuel at all. I can't eat anything before I run, because here's the one thing that I didn't talk about is underfueling on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm.
So simply like let's say you just forget to, eat, or you have a salad for lunch. That consistent underfueling in itself can cause GI issues on runs. Even like
Mm.
the unintentional underfueling piece of it. And so that's where again it's not only, if somebody's running high mileage, we might have to be intentional about cutting back on fruits and vegetables in order to fuel enough and get enough in, because if you're under fueling, this means that your body doesn't have enough energy and it has to shut down different parts of other functioning parts of your body, like we think of reproductive system, so like loss of menstrual cycle, but that doesn't necessarily always happen. It could show up as GI issues in some people, where it's not enough energy available to release the enzymes that are needed to help digest food.
Oh, yeah, and that's, like, something that you think, like, underfueling, not great for anyone anytime, right? But it does happen, and it happens quite a bit, I think, within our community because we're running, we're burning a lot of energy, and, who is spending the time tracking on a day-to-day basis or understanding or learning about exactly what they need to take in various cycles of their training? It can be extremely difficult. Um, and thinking about going into runs under fueled, it feels like it would be the opposite of like, oh, you'd have a happy stomach, but it can really cause a lot of GI distress.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Wow, that's incredible. So, for our listeners, I think it's really good to take note of where you are. What's happening? When do you notice it? What are you fueling with? And, if it's okay, jot things down, write things down and keep track of what's working, what's not working. And then you can reach out and work with a registered dietitian to really help you kind of nail down what you need to do to be able to get over that hump and feel good in training, because that's ultimately what we want. We want to run happy. We want to run strong. We want to run for fun and have all that goodness come together. And a happy gut is a happy runner for sure.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kristy, for your time today. I really appreciate you. For the Elevate audience who's looking to connect with you online, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, marathon.nutritionist. And feel free to reach out and send me a direct message if you listen to this episode, if there's any big takeaways. It's always fun to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I know the audience appreciates you, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.